Hello, my name is Peter Walker-Birch with the second video podcast for Clinical Placement 1 for 2015. I sincerely hope that you are all very well and that you have had a good start to your first few weeks in the clinical practice setting as student radiographers. Firstly, I should like to apologise for the lateness in getting this second video podcast out to you. I am gutted, if truth be told, as I was expecting to have had a few podcasts out to you by now. Unfortunately, I haven't been very well over the last few weeks with what started as a persistent sore throat or sore thought, and subsequently it turned out to be something a little bit more serious than that, a quinsy. Not to be confused with Quincy M.E., the American TV series from the 1970s about an LA County medical examiner starring Jack Krugman. A quinsy is a peritonsillar abscess, i.e. a very swollen area around the tonsils containing an accumulation of pus. It meant an overnight stay in hospital, unfortunately, with intravenous antibiotics, intravenous painkillers, as well as a procedure to aspirate the abscess. Not a pleasant procedure at all, I have to say. I've been off work for a week to recuperate, and I'm now feeling much better. Now, one of the consequences of my recent hospital admission was that I was unable to present at the UKRC this year. UKRC, for those that don't know, stands for United Kingdom Radiology Congress, so the largest diagnostic imaging event in the UK. It is well attended by a wide range of people involved in medical imaging. It was held in Liverpool this year, and I was meant to be presenting with my very good friend, colleague, and video podcast co-conspirator, Mr. Mark Widdowfield. It was meant to be on the use of video podcasts to support students in the clinical practice setting. Unfortunately, Mark had to deliver the presentation on his own, for which I owe him a huge set of gratitude. I have to say that the presentation that Mark delivered went down very well indeed, and there is the prospect of doing some collaborative work with the University of Sydney as a result. So thank you, Mark, you are a star. Now, I hope that you like the Blockbusters theme at the beginning of this video podcast. This was a theme that we used last year, but has undergone something of a revamp in the form of creating a realistic virtual studio using some free 3D software called Blender. Some of you probably won't recognise the theme tune, as Blockbusters was a tremendous hit back in the early 1980s, and some of you were probably not born then, which makes me feel very old indeed. It was hosted by the legendary Bob Holness, who sadly died in 2012. Now, the aim of the Blockbusters game was to test the theory that two heads were better than one, with a team of two taking on a single opponent. The contestants would be asked some trivia type questions to complete a path across or down a game board made of hexagons. Now, you would identify a letter on the board by saying, "Can I have a W please, Bob?" And many of us less mature-minded students would sort of revel in smirking when the inevitable "Can I have a P please, Bob?" got asked. Now, Blockbusters had a massive cult following from students, and I, for one, loved watching it when I got home from school. I love the fact that this quiz was geared towards sixth form students, which made a big change from seeing adults competing in these kinds of quizzes. As you can see, back in the 1980s, I cut quite a dashing figure, not in my chief officer naval uniform, when I was a student at a prestigious nautical school in Hull called Hull Trinity House. Now, the reason for the Blockbusters clip is that I have taken some time to create a Blockbusters style quiz for you to engage with. It's actually three quizzes, a normal quiz and two gold runs. They are all on radiographic and clinical terminology. Now, I haven't had time to voice any of the questions for obvious reasons, so do make good use of the pause button when taking part in the quiz. You will find that I have created the quiz separately from this video podcast to make it easier to engage with the quiz without having to forward past me prattling on every time. There are 60 questions in total, which should go some way to helping you to improve your knowledge of radiographic and clinical terms. I have provided you with an answer sheet, and I will be putting this answer sheet up for you to use, and I will also be providing you with the answers next week. Also, I have created another quiz for you based on Countdown, which is a long-running quiz show that started back on the 2nd of November 1982. In fact, it was the first ever programme to be broadcast on the newly created Channel 4. I remember the first show being broadcast and was excited at the prospect of having a grand total of 4 channels to choose from. Wow, how things have changed. Countdown was originally hosted by the inimitable Richard Whiteley, a fellow Yorkshireman, I am proud to say, who I remember fondly from his days on Calendar, a regional news programme for the Yorkshire region, a little bit like Caramelia with the Look North team up in this part of the world. Now, the final round of Countdown was always the Countdown Conundrum, a 9-letter anagram that had to be solved in 30 seconds. So for this quiz, I thought that I would follow in that splendid tradition and set you a number of anagrams based on fracture terminology, including eponymous fracture terms. Now, when you come to start engaging with preliminary clinical evaluation, PCE, on radiographic images in clinical placement 3, you will find that eponymous terms are no longer used or avoided, and for good reason, as they represent a specific fracture pattern, and they are commonly misused or misinterpreted. That said, you will still find the terms being used and written on X-ray requests, so it is useful to be aware of them. Engaging with the Countdown quiz should help you to start thinking about typical fractures encountered in the clinical practice setting and the types of projections used to image these fractures, all useful for your tripartite assessment. Now, there are 20 anagrams in this particular video. You might get a little bit fed up of the countdown timer music, so please feel free to turn the sound off should you wish. I will put up an answer sheet for you to use on Blackboard. In addition, there are another 20 anagrams for you to solve on the answer sheet, and I will release the answers next week along with the answers for the Blockbusters quiz. Now, the focus in the module guide for the last few weeks has been on clinical and radiographic terminology, abbreviations, alternative projections and typical fractures. It is a good idea to keep a log of all the radiographic terminology and abbreviations that you come across to help you build up a comprehensive vocabulary of clinical terms. There is a wiki on the Clinical Placement 1 Blackboard site that you can use to help you log and share with your peers any terminology that you think might be useful, as well as alternative imaging strategies and projections. Take careful notes of radiology requests, electronic or paper-based, and radiology reports in RIS or PACS. When it comes to alternative imaging strategies, radiology reports often suggest follow-up imaging or alternative imaging strategies that can be used. Also, there are departmental protocol guides that often suggest alternative imaging or projections depending on the pathology or clinical question in hand. I would start to keep a log of all the different projections that you do, particularly ones that go beyond the typical AP and lateral projections. So, for example, what are the alternative projections that are used for imaging the humerus, the elbow, or the knee? For example, when is a skyline patella carried out? You might want to look at tangential projections of the knee to find out a little bit more, as there are a number of projections that can be used, like a merchant projection, or a Houston projection, or a Lauren projection. You should also try and look at the rationale for using MRI, ultrasound, CT and nuclear medicine procedures. When and why would you use these different modalities? You might want to look at what advantages and disadvantages that these modalities have over imaging different pathologies. Another good source of information is the Teesside University referral criteria and exposure document that I gave you during the lab sessions for Clinical Placement 1, which you will find on Blackboard. You will find a list of alternative modalities for a range of clinical questions where general X-ray is not indicated. For example, nuclear medicine for bone metastases. Don't forget also there is plenty of terminology in the Clinical Placement 1 Workbook 2 that you have all received during the practical radiographic sessions at the start of Clinical Placement 1. By the way, I have just posted my photo on Twitter to support the Hello My Name Is campaign. I haven't received any photos yet from any of you, but if you would like to participate, just send me a picture of you with your Hello My Name Is campaign banner, and I will tweet it and incorporate it into a future video podcast. Anyway, I'll say goodbye for now so that you can get on with the Blockbusters and Countdown quiz. I hope that you have another lovely week in clinical practice. If you want to drop me a line or to tell me how you are getting on in placement, just send me a tweet or send me an email. As always, I would really love to hear from you all. So, in typical Bob Horner style, goodbye for now from all of us. Bye-bye.